never made it, but I know what it takes. I'm motivated by a mix of emotion. Got my statement, and I'm reading it slow so I can understand it fully. Appreciate my standing, go out of this world and right on time. Oh, never in my life have I seen the sky light up like this. I'm far away from Earth and I wanna know if you exist. Mission control, do you read me? Send me my coordinates lately. Mission control, am I drifting? Tie me to someone who will love me, yeah. Wait, I think I'll last a bit longer. Fine.
Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd Family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. I want to start out today's video by saying that I've got a shout out coming up at the end of the video, so please stay tuned for that. And then I want to say that if you did not watch the Game 5 last night in the Eastern Conference semifinals between the Bucks and the Celtics, you missed a great basketball game. And if you watched it and did not think it was a great basketball game, you know nothing about basketball, because that was a phenomenal game. I know before the playoffs started, I said the NBA Finals would be a repeat of last year with the Bucks and the Suns playing each other again. I have not seen anything yet to make me change my mind. I still say that's who it's going to be, but I will say that game last night was tremendous, and the Celtics are putting up a great fight. But we'll talk more about the NBA playoffs as the divisional rounds in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference come to a close before we start the Eastern Conference Finals and the Western Conference Finals. Today we're going to be talking about college football. I know earlier this week, I think it was on Tuesday, I said I had at least one more college football video coming up this week. And then ever since then, I've contemplated which one I was going to do, because there's been a lot of college football headlines over the past week or so. It's amazing how sometimes it seems like there's more stuff going on in the off season than there is the actual season. And then I finally decided on this particular topic for this video, and the reason is I've got a question, and my question is, will other conferences follow suit? And what I mean by this, in case you are not up to date, is earlier this week it was announced, I believe on Monday, that the ACC was going to vote and meet up and have a discussion about doing away with the divisions in football. Of course, we have the Atlantic on one side and the Coastal on one side. And ever since then, there's been, many reports and many rumors coming out as to why they're doing it. And then last night, probably around 6 o'clock, I read an article about exactly what the plan is. And the ACC commissioner says they're going to try to go with a 3-5-5 rule. And they're going to try their best to go ahead and vote so that if it happens, it can take place 2023, because obviously it's too late to go ahead and take effect this year because the schedules are already out. But I do think there are multiple reasons for it, and that's why I say will other conferences follow suit, because it makes so much more sense than having divisions. Because if you look at any conference, it can be the Big Ten, the Pac-12, the SEC, the ACC, it doesn't matter which one you look at. In each conference, the divisions are not equal. There's one side that's far and away tougher than the other side. So it does make it unfair. You can look at an example, a couple of years ago, Clemson played in the ACC championship game against Virginia. And honestly, really, truly, Virginia was probably about the 5th best team in the conference. But they were the best team from the side they're on, because the side they're on is the weaker side. You can look, for example, at the SEC, and it's not even close. It's not even arguable that the SEC West is by far and away better than the East. But there was a time towards the end of the Mark Richt tenure and towards the beginning of the Kirby Smart tenure that Georgia was the best team in the East, but they were really about the fourth best team in the conference because Bama was better. At that time, Auburn was better. LSU was better, but they were still going to the conference championship game because they were the best team on their side. And the conference championship game should be the best two teams in the conference. It shouldn't matter what side you're on. You can look, for example, at Clemson and Florida State. Now, it's not a good example right now because Florida State's been down for the past 4 or 5 years, but, let's say they don't do away with divisions and they keep it like it is. Clemson and Florida State play on the same side, and Clemson's rival from the other side is Georgia Tech. They play Georgia Tech every year. Well, we know most years Georgia Tech, they suck. And Miami is Florida State's rival from the other side. And most years Miami is good, but even when they're down, they're still better than Georgia Tech. And then, of course, the other team you play rotates. Well, let's say Clemson winds up with Duke, and we'll say Florida State winds up with Pittsburgh. Well, they play the same 6 teams from the side they're on because they're on the same side. But then when you look at the other side, Clemson matches up with Georgia Tech and Duke, while Florida State gets Miami and Pittsburgh. So Florida State might be a better team than Clemson, but more than likely Clemson's going to have the better record because your schedule was a little bit weaker. So they're trying to make it to where that kind of thing won't matter and it'll be evened up. They're calling it the 3-5-5 because if they do it, each team will have 3 teams that you'll play every single year. They're going to stick with 8 conference games. I know some conferences play 9 conference games, but the ACC and the SEC still just play 8. They're going to stick with that, and each team will have 3 teams that you'll play every year, no matter what. And then you'll rotate the other 5 teams. So you'll play 5 one year, the other 5 the next year. Because the way it looks right now, outside of your cross-division rival in every conference, and it's funny because my good friends Edward and Derek and I were talking about this yesterday, how it's supposed to be, evened up, and you're supposed to play every team the same amount of times, but it doesn't happen. Since the ACC has went to divisions like this and went to 14 teams, I think Clemson's played North Carolina like twice in 10 years. It's every once in a while. It seems like every single team outside of Georgia Tech, they play every year, they only play Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh, and then occasionally, like this year, it's Miami. Somehow they always miss Duke. They always miss North Carolina. You can look at Georgia, for example. Georgia plays Auburn every year from the West, and then the other teams are supposed to rotate. But it seems like Georgia plays LSU about once every 5 or 6 years. So even though they claim it's even, it's not even. Somehow, some way, you play some teams more than you play other teams. So they're trying to get rid of that and trying to make it to where you can't play everybody because there's 13 teams in the ACC, not including yourself, and you're going to play 8 conference games. So you can't play everybody, but it will be a more balanced schedule, and at least this way, every 2 years, you've played everybody in the conference. You ain't got to play somebody at home and then wait 5 years before you go there, because it's going to be to the point to where you'll play 5 teams one year, the other 5 teams the next year, and then 3 teams you'll play every single year. I like this. I hope they go with it. I hope they go through with it. Now, of course, the Big 12 has, basically a round-robin format because there's only 10 teams in the Big 12 for now. Now, they're talking about expanding and going back to at least 12 teams, but for now, there's only 10 teams in the Big 12, and you play 9 conference games in the Big 12, so it's basically a round robin format. Everybody plays everybody because you have 9 conference games, and at the end of the season, the 2 teams that have the best record play each other again for the conference championship. I mean, that's the easiest thing you can do. But unfortunately, in every other conference, there's more than 10 teams. So unless you're going to play only conference schedule, there's always going to be teams you're not going to play. But at least this way it will balance it out some, because it's not fair when you have a conference championship game, no matter what conference it is, when one side has, the 3 or 4 best teams, and then the 4th or 5th best team from the other side gets to play in the conference championship just because their side is weaker. That's not quite fair. So it does make sense to me, but if this doesn't work and it doesn't get voted, I think they need to at least try to realign the divisions so that it's a little more evened out. Now, I know that this stuff comes and goes, and I know that, right now NC State is really good, but in 3 years, they may not be any good. And I know, right now North Carolina's down, but in 3 years, they may improve. And when that kind of thing happens, the conferences will balance out a little bit as far as divisions go, but then it won't, because then you'll have another team that you don't expect to be good will be good. And the team that you expect to be bad will be bad. So even though you think it'll get more evened up, it won't, because there'll be surprises along the way. But like I said earlier, in every single conference, you look at the divisions, and one side is far and away more superior than the other side. I don't know how that happens, but you would think when they put this stuff out, they would go into it and look at it before they release it, and look at how many good teams and how many bad teams are on each side to try to make it more even. But they don't, because in every conference, there's one side of the division that's way tougher than the other side. And I don't know how it happens, but it happens. So I'm hoping, like I said, that this passes, and I'm just wondering if anybody has any thoughts and ideas or suggestions on it. And do you think, if this does go through, do you think the SEC will follow suit? Will the Pac-12 follow suit? Because the Pac-12 needs to do something, because the Pac-12 just flat out sucks, and nobody watches it, and nobody cares about it. But you need to do something to try to be, more intriguing, to try to make outsiders, watch. Because right now, nobody watches the Pac-12 except for the Pac-12. You can look at any other conference, whether it's the ACC, the Big 10, or the Big 12, or the SEC, and you can look and say that each conference has 2 or 3 teams that people are going to watch, even if they're not a fan of that team, just because of the name recognition, or the colors, or the coach, or tradition, or something. But there ain't not one team in the Pac-12 that makes people say, you know what, I'm going to watch that game because of so-and-so. You know what, you used to be that way with USC, but USC's been so irrelevant for the last decade that even they don't bring in outsiders anymore. So the Pac-12 needs to do something like this just to try to make people watch, because what they've done over the past decade has not worked. They have, to my knowledge, the Pac-12 network, and they started it years ago, and it's been around, I know, for at least 10 years now, and you still can't find it on your cable or satellite service, which tells you that absolutely nobody watches it. So they can't even get nobody to watch their own doggone network. So that tells you the Pac-12 is struggling. So they need to do something just to try to make people watch their football games, because what they're doing right now ain't working. But I would love to see this in every conference, just to make it more balanced on both sides, and to make it to where you play everybody every 2 years, because it makes more sense that way than to have a team like last year when Clemson played Pittsburgh. I think it was the second time they've played Pittsburgh since Pittsburgh's been in the ACC. Well, that's stupid. Well, why in the fool even have a team in your conference if you're not going to play them? That makes no sense. So at least this way, you'll be playing every team every 2 years. Now, of course, it's still going to be a little more unbalanced, because each team is going to have 3 teams that you play every year. And of course, they haven't announced yet, who's going to play who because they haven't voted yet. But obviously, whoever gets the easier teams out of those 13 teams that you play every year, those are going to be 3 more winnable games than somebody else who has 3 of the better teams in the ACC. So it's never going to be perfect, but I do like the idea. I like the strategy, mainly just because of the fact you play everybody every 2 years, but also this way, when it comes time for the conference championship game, you're going to have the 2 best teams in the conference. Not one team that's in there at 7-5 just because they're the best team on their side and we know their side sucked. That's not quite fair. So I do love the idea. Any thoughts on it, please feel free to let me know. My shout out today goes out to my man Alex, who subscribed to the channel yesterday. He lives in the upstate of South Carolina. He told me he likes all sports, and I told him, check out my YouTube page, but for the most part, I only talk baseball, basketball, football, NASCAR, and wrestling. And of course, we do top 10 countdowns every single week. Some of those are about sports, some are not, but I try my best not to venture out into the more unheard of sports as of now. Now, as the channel grows and we get more and more subscribers and more folks watching, I may start talking, hockey and boxing and tennis and things like that. But I know those are the lesser known sports, so I feel like you're only hurting yourself when you talk about sports that not many people watch. But if your channel gets big enough and you've got enough subscribers, then there's going to be somebody that watches boxing, somebody that watches soccer, somebody that watches hockey. So if the channel ever gets big enough, we may talk about some of those more unheard of sports. But Alex, thank you so much for subscribing. Tell your friends, tell your family, give the video a thumbs up. And if you do so choose to comment on any video at any time, you will be eligible for our 1,000 subscriber giveaway that we'll be having whenever we get to 1,000 subscribers. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. Why can't you send a duck to space? Because the bill would be astronomical. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.